This demonstration is going to show you how to sew on by hand. So just so you know, you're going to be using your hand sewing needle and thread again. How to hand sew on hooks and eyes, and as well as a snap. And so for this sample, you're going to use your hook and eye 6x6 and your hook and eye 3x6 interfacing. And just make sure that you paid attention to those cuttings. You need to cut 2 of both of those. So I'm going to go ahead and set those patterns to the side. And again, what you're going to want to do is apply that interfacing piece to the back side of your fabric and then fold that fabric in half. And so as you can see, I've done that for both of my samples, and then I folded them in half. And I've gone ahead and just pressed a nice clean line along the fold. So again, just make sure that you have your interfacing vertical. And the way that I press mine was that my interfacing is going to be on the underside of each of my folds. So when I folded them over, my interfacing is against my table on both samples. All right, so once you have this done, you want to indicate your overlap and your underlap position, because where we typically see hooks and eyes and skirt hooks and snaps are usually along, like you'll see hooks and eyes at the tops of zippers, just to make sure that the zipper is going to stay together. And you'll especially see your skirt hook and eye, or your skirt hook along the waistband of dress slacks or a skirt. Again, usually on top of some sort of closure, a zipper, but in this case along the waistband area, just to hold everything tight and in place. So what we need to first do is identify our underlap and overlap, and we're going to take the underlap piece. So I'm going to cross mine left over right, and I'm going to take my underlap piece and turn that sideways and use my ruler, and I'm going to indicate an underlap of 1.25 inches. So 1.25 inches, and I'm going to run that folded edge along my 1.25 inch from the far edge of my ruler, so going down 1.25 inch in, and then I'm going to come and I'm just going to mark along the top and along the bottom of my sample at that 1.25 inch markings. Alright, so then what I can do is I can lay my other piece of fabric right over top, matching up those, matching up the overlap and the underlap, so we have a total of 1.25 inches lapping over one another. Alright, so it's important also that we kind of think about how we're going to space out all of the things that we're sewing along this line, because we're sewing a regular hook and eye, we're doing a thread hook and eye, we're doing a skirt hook and eye, and then we're doing a snap. So what I think we should do is we should kind of divide up the length of this folded area into 4 quadrants. And so I'm first going to divide the length, which is 6, I'm going to divide that into 2. So put a little mark at 3. And then half of 3 is 1.5, and then half of 3 again is 1.5. So from the 3 inch mark, I'm going to go up 1.5 inches and put a little mark. And then again, of course, like that's right on the black area, so I'm going to go ahead and put a little pin to indicate where that marking is. And so as you can see, we now have 4 quadrants. 1, 2, 3, 4. And within each of these, I want to try to center each of my hook and eye samples. So if you want to, go ahead and remove your top flap and do those markings on your along your under flap as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that real quick. Got my 3 inch marking here, my 4.5 here, and my 1.5 on the black. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a pen and mark that. So then I have the same 4 quadrants on my underlap as I do on my overlap. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start along the top of my sample, my underlap overlap, and I'm going to use my regular hook and eye. Now these are going to be very hard to see, but the reason why we call them a hook and eye is because one piece is the hook and the other one is the latch or the eye part that the hook then goes into. So it's going to hook into one another and lock into place so that like dress doesn't come undone, or our top or our pants or whatever we're attaching at the top, so that we don't put any extra stress on the closure. So whether that be a zipper or some sort of other placket, that we aren't pulling that apart. So I'm going to do my my regular hook and eye first, and again we need our hand sewing needle. I want to show you, I found this at the store, so if there's some people that are struggling with threading your hand sewing needle, this is called a needle threader, okay? And it comes just in a pack. Mine came in a pack of 3. And I'm already used one and lost it. So what this does is you put this little pointed end through the hole of your eye of the needle, and I think I have it in there. Nope, keep missing. I'm gonna stick that through the eye of the needle, and then what this does is it just gives me a bigger space to drop my thread into that little opening, and then I can pull it through the eye of the needle here. Alright, it's kind of getting caught up, so I'm going to see if I can pull the rest of it through, and then I can just slide that off my needle threader. Now the end of this needle threader here is very fine. It's a very fine, flexible kind of metal wire, so if you do decide to get some of those needle threaders, it might be a good idea to just put it back in its case so it doesn't get all damaged up. Okay, and again, your book suggests just using a 1 thick thread to go ahead and put these hooks and eyes on, but I'm going to use a double thread. Alright, so the first thing that we're going to want to do is we want to place our hook on the underside of the first quadrant. And if you want to, I think I'm going to go ahead and do this. I'm going to mark those quadrants again on the underside of the overlap. So let's see here. I got 3. I can see where 1.5 is because my needle's sticking out, and then I'm also going to do another little marking here so I can see those quadrants. Okay, so I'm working on the underside of the overlap, if that makes sense, up in this first quadrant here. And I'm going to take my hook part of my hook and eye, and I'm going to place it so that it's maybe about 1/4 inch in from the folded edge here. And then what we want to do is we want to only grab the fabric to sew this on with the side that has that interfacing, or whatever is on the underside of yours, if yours doesn't have that interfacing. And then as I pull this through, I'm going to go ahead and grab that kind of lasso that's formed by the knot. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you try to keep the edge of this hook fairly parallel with the edge of your fold. Now, if you want to, this might be helpful for you. Go ahead and unfold that fabric so you don't have to worry about it going through and catching. And then you can just put your finger on the back side and hold your hook in place so that it's parallel to that crease seam. And then all you do is you kind of do this whip stitch around the edge, going from the back side to the front, and attaching the holes of that of the bottom curved edge of your hook part of your hook and eye. And then once you get, like I think I did 3 or 4 on one edge of the hook, I'm going to go and then cross over to the other curved edge, and I'm just going to go ahead and whip stitch that into place, again going from the back to the front, and just putting 3 or 4 kind of whip stitches around the edge. And it looks like I've got a ravel thread that's kind of trying to jump in there. Okay. Now when you get 3 or 4 of these done, what we need to do is we need to kind of put a tack in up towards the front of this of the hook here. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put your thread, push it down into the fabric, and pop it up so that it's just underneath of that hook area. So we're running that thread along the back side so that it ends up being fairly parallel to run right underneath of the kind of that shank part of the hook. And so what I'm going to do is I'm now just going to kind of wrap this around, wrap my thread around so that it goes underneath and then back on top, or kind of in between this hook space. Hopefully you can see that there, that my thread is running in between that hook. So I'm just going underneath, and then I'm kind of maneuvering my thread so that it runs inside of that hook and then back down into the fabric underneath of the hook end. My thread is going in between the bottom edge of the hook and then that part that actually forms the hook and comes up towards me. Alright, and after I do a few of those, I'm going to cross back over on my final one, go back down into the fabric, and then tie a knot on the back side. And again, to do that, what you can do is you can just put your needle back underneath that area of thread that you've already sewn, make that lasso and pull your thread through, and then I always do an extra knot. Alright, and then you can go ahead and trim that fairly close. Alright, so let's go ahead and refold that back over, and what we have is we have a nice hook here. Looks like I've got a loose thread again. Must be the story of my day. I might be able to just pull that loose thread to the back side, but it's not too bad. Then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and use the rest of this thread that I have, so I'm going to knot the end. And then what we need to do now is we need to place place the eye part so that it's just opposite to. Let me make sure I need to make sure I have my overlap and my underlap identified. I'm working in that top quadrant, and then so I'm going to be working in this quadrant here, but I need to also mark this up to make sure that everything is good to go. Alright, so I have that pin in place for that first quadrant, and it looks like I'm still on the black there, but I'm on the white here, so that should show up. So I'm going to go ahead and put another pin in this so I can see where my 3-inch marking spot is for my quadrant area. Okay, so I have my needle and thread, and I'm just going to double check again, making sure that I'm choosing the correct quadrant to work with. And then what we want to do is there's a little bit of a lip on this eye part, and you want to make sure that the lip is facing up towards you. You don't want to sew it so that it's facing down into the fabric, but you want it to be popping up towards you. And again, you're going to place this, try to center that right in the quadrant area. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to line mine up so that they're right opposite of each other, so I can just make sure that I'm getting about the same distance apart here. So I'm right about there. I feel like my hand is like shaking so bad. Jeez Louise, if I can get that to stay in place. Alright, so I'm about 1/4 inch from the edge. Okay, now I'm going to think about this. If I want this to overlap and be 1/8 of we want to have this overlap be at 1 1/4. That means that I need to have my eye part be right. I'm going to go ahead. What I'm doing is I'm putting a pin, I'm sticking it right through the hook, and I'm going to poke it down right into where that needs to go. And what I'm kind of doing, and I know it's very hard to see, but I'm overlapping these so that the hook is over top of that, and then I'm just going to identify right where the edge of that hook lands. So it should be about 1/4 inch in, 1/8 to 1/4 inch in from your 1 1/4 marking line. I'm glad I kind of thought about that, because I was like, oh no, we are not lining this up right, because we need to have that 1 1/4 inch overlap. So again, what we're going to want to do is, and this thing is so small and my fingernails are not working with me today, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to center that in that quadrant about 1/4 inch inward towards the folded edge of where I marked my 1 1/4 inch overlap. So I'm going to go ahead and take out my pin very gently, And then I'm going to run my needle and thread in so that I'm only catching the fabric. I'm going to put my knot on the back side. And then from here on out, we're going to go through both layers because this is the underlap and no one will see it. And I want to make sure that this is going to be good and sturdy. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to whip stitch this into place, going through all the layers. And we didn't want to go through all the layers on the hook because that's the outside of the garment. Alright, so I did about, this is my third whip stitch. And I'm going to do 4. And I want to make sure that that this is staying fairly vertical and parallel to that marking line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back down around the back side, put my needle in, and then pop it up so that it wants to come through about where that the opposite hole is on the eye. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just flip my fabric around because I'm right-handed and it's easier for me. And I'm just going to whip stitch this edge into place with about 3 or 4 whip stitch on the side. Whip stitches around the outside edge. 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle down in to the fabric and pull it back on the outside. So on the back side of that fabric, and then I'm just going to knot it off. Okay. Tie a knot and then do another one. My thread's getting kind of short here. Alright. Okay. Good to go there. So then I'm just going to trim up my thread tails and I'm just going to test this baby out. Making sure that it overlaps, and I'm just going to run this hook right into that eye until it locks in, and that's matching up right with that outside edge of that top there. So just so you can hopefully get a quick look at what we're seeing is that's hooking into the hook is hooking into the eye, and you can kind of feel it snap a little bit over a lip that is designed to be part of this hook and eye. Okay, I'm going to do the next video for the thread hook and eye, and we'll be moving down into the second quadrant.